Hello everyone, welcome to Study Vibes with Ash. So I had already uploaded एक वीडियो जो मैंने पहले अपलोड की थी उस पर मैंने पार्ट 1 ऑफ पॉलिटिकल थियरी जिसमें कि जो पॉलिटिकल थियरी के पहले जो एक हिस्सा है उसका मैंने आंसर्स और जो एक्सपेक्टेड क्वेश्चंस है उसके हिसाब से आंसर्स दिए हुए हैं. सो दिस इज़ द सेकेंड पार्ट एंड होपफुली आई एम होपिंग टू कंप्लीट जितना हो सके उतना या फिर एक और पार्ट में आई विल वाइंड दिस अप and then I'll move on to the next of the papers. Okay, so without much ado, let me begin, and also do not forget to subscribe, share, like and comment the video. Also मुझे comments में बताना कि आपको अगर कोई improvement की ज़रूरत हो or you need some help, whatever. ठीक है? So let's move on. Okay, so theme 2 is democracy. तो जो पहला क्वेश्चन है या जो एरिया है जिससे काफ़ी सारे क्वेश्चंस आते हैं वो हिस्टोरिकल बैकग्राउंड एंड एवोल्यूशन ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी. जैसे कि मैंने कहा प्रिपेयरिंग विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू अराउंड 400 वर्ड्स, हर एक आंसर जो कि इस वीडियो में पहले की वीडियो में और आगे जो भी वीडियोस आएंगे उसमें ज़्यादातर 400 वर्ड्स के ही आंसर्स है. तो अगर आप चाहें तो यू कैन टेक देम डाउन बाय पॉजिंग द वीडियो या फिर आप अपने आप से जैसे भी आप एक्सप्रेस करना चाहते हैं वैसे आप आइडिया समझ के अपने लैंग्वेज में या अपने तौर तरीके से यू कैन एक्सप्रेस इट. सो इंट्रोडक्शन में यू कैन से डेमोक्रेसी डिराइव्ड फ्रॉम द ग्रीक वर्ड्स डेमोस यानी कि पीपल एंड क्रेटोस यानी कि रूल. तो डेमोक्रेसी का मतलब है सिस्टम वेयर पॉलिटिकल अथॉरिटी रेस्ट विद द people. So the authority is for the people, by the people and of the people idea. So it has evolved over centuries, shaped by philosophical debates, revolutions, industrialization and social movements. Its historical evolution reflects humanity's struggle for freedom, participation and political equality. ठीक है, तो पहला पॉइंट उसमें कि ये वाले क्वेश्चन में हमें वो एवोल्यूशन बतानी है कि डेमोक्रेसी फ्रॉम हिस्ट्री टू historical times to present times कैसे पहुंची आज तक. So first, ancient Greek democracy, direct democracy in Athens. It is considered to be the earliest form. इसीलिए democracy का origin ही कहाँ से है? Demo मतलब people and kratos मतलब rule. It's from Greek words. तो ग्रीस में क्या होता था, सिटीजन्स डिबेट करते थे और वो असेंबली में दे यूज टू डिसाइड जस्ट लाइक हाउ जो आज के पार्लियामेंट में होते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल काउंसिल ऑफ 500, ऑस्ट्रासिज्म, पब्लिक डिबेट्स, ऐसी सारी चीज़ें होती थी एथेंस में. तो इसके नेगेटिव्स क्या थे? इट एक्सक्लूडेड विमेन, स्लेव्स एंड फॉरेनर्स. इन सबको इंक्लूड नहीं करते थे. देन कम्स द सेकेंड स्टेज विच वी कैन फाइंड इन रोमन रिपब्लिकनिज्म. तो उसमें क्या होता था? दे हैड अ मिक्स्ड गवर्नमेंट, रूल ऑफ लॉ, सिविक वर्च्यूज़, ये सारी चीज़ें. तो उसमें कॉन्सेप्ट्स लाइक सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर्स एंड रिप्रेजेंटेशन वो सारी चीज़ें भी थी. वहीं से वी हैव टर्म्स लाइक सेनेट, कॉन्स्यूल्स, ट्राइब्यून्स, ये सब हम आज भी इस्तेमाल करते हैं. देन कम्स मीडिवल डेवलपमेंट्स. तो डेमोक्रेसी का जो डिक्लाइन हुआ वो मीडिवल टाइम्स में हुआ ड्यूरिंग फ्यूडलिज्म, बट इट सॉर्ट ऑफ ग्रू बैक थ्रू मैग्ना कार्टा because Magna Carta was what it established the rule of law. जहाँ पर यह कहा गया कि king arbitrarily he cannot rule. So Magna Carta again brought back the idea of democracy. Then comes the great era of Renaissance and Enlightenment. Thinkers like Locke, Rousseau, Montesquieu, they provided the philosophical foundations. Locke argued for natural rights and consent, while as Rousseau gave importance to sovereignty. Then Montesquieu talks about separation of powers. ये सारी चीज़ें और all of these thinkers, they are still relevant because even now our political theory और आजकल के जो political theories है, they are all influenced by natural right, consent, sovereignty, separation of powers, etc. Even in modern democracies, they are very much important. Then comes the American and French Revolution. American Revolution in 1776 established a constitution based on rights and representative government. The French government in 1789 spread the principles of liberty, equality and fraternity. Then comes 19th century democratic expansion. तो उसमें क्या हुआ? Industrialization led to demands for universal suffrage because they started feeling that their demands are not being met. Then trade unions, workers' movements, reform acts, all of these things started coming up. That is more and more political participation. Example would be Britain's reform acts that sort of extended the voting rights. Then 20th century developments. After world wars, democracy spread to Europe, Asia and Africa, and decolonization made people realize that हमें democracy ही चाहिए. And then universal electric franchise became widespread. Rise of social democracy blended capitalism with welfare. Then 21st century trends. That includes digital technology. जहाँ पर everybody is having a voice. So that's again increasing participation. Now what are the challenges? Populism, misinformation, erosion of trust, surveillance, ये सारी चीज़ें. लेकिन उसकी पॉजिटिव्स क्या है? ई गवर्नेंस जैसी चीज़ें, ट्रांसपेरेंसी, सिविक एंगेजमेंट, मोर पार्टिसिपेशन एक्सेट्रा. तो पॉइंट्स क्या क्या हुए? वी स्टार्टेड फ्रॉम एथेंस. एथेंस में जहाँ पे काउंसिल्स होते थे, डिस्कशंस होते थे, वहाँ से हम आए रोमन्स. वहाँ पे मिक्स गवर्नमेंट थी, सेनेट, कॉन्स्यूल्स, सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर, ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स. Medieval में हम क्या बोल सकते हैं? We can talk about the fact that democracy was in decline. Then there was a rise through Magna Carta. Then in Renaissance and Enlightenment period, thinkers like Locke, Rousseau and Montesquieu, they contributed to the evolution of democracy further, which is staying till now. Then comes American and French revolutions, where American Revolution formulated a constitution based on rights and representative government. French Revolution, the three principles of liberty, equality and fraternity. Then in 19th century again, industrialization led to further rise of democratic needs, trade unions, workers unions, all of that. 20th century, after world wars, these democratic needs or the need for a democratic government spread to other parts of the world. And decolonization also enabled democracies and universal franchise. Then in 21st century, we can talk about the digital boom and how it has enhanced democracy further. So in conclusion, we can say the democracy evolved from limited ancient models to modern representative and participatory forms. It remains dynamic, adapting to societal changes and emerging challenges. The history of democracy illustrates humanity's continuous pursuit of freedom, equality and accountable governance. Okay. Next comes types and forms of democracy. So democracy exists in multiple forms depending on history, culture and institutional arrangements. Though all democratic systems emphasize popular participation and legitimacy, they differ. So हर एक democracy का एक ही purpose है, that is what? Populace, that is people's participation, and the governing body should be legitimate. But difference कैसे होती है? Difference occurs in the way how this power is exercised or the way how people exercise their power. So understanding these variations helps explain the diversity of democratic practices across societies. So first point is direct democracy. उसमें क्या है? डायरेक्ट मतलब citizens participate directly in the decision making, जैसे कि एथेंस में थी. Even in Switzerland, they conduct referendums. तो वहाँ पे हर एक citizen को अपना opinion directly देना होता है. So the strength is that it calls for high participation and legitimacy, but the limitation is you can't do it for large population. Then comes representative democracy. Representative democracy में क्या होता है? Citizens elect representatives who make decisions on their behalf. जैसे कि हमारे देश में most modern democracies follow this model, like in India, USA, UK, etc. It is efficient for large and complex societies. But the limitation is what? It can lead to elitism or lack of accountability. Then third one is parliamentary democracy. Now parliamentary democracy, again, what we see in India, which is executive is drawn and accountable to the legislature. That is, legislature is a lawmaking body and executive is also part of the legislature. So it fuses the executive and legislative power. Separation of power is not that strict as you may see in US. Example is India and UK. Why India and UK? क्योंकि हमने ब्रिटेन के पार्लियामेंट्री गवर्नमेंट या डेमोक्रेटिक मॉडल से ही हमने भी बोरा किया था. तो इसका what is the advantage? High accountability and flexible government, because the executive cannot act independent of whatever the parliament decides. यानी कि even the opposition has a role to play. अब इसका limitation क्या है? Unstable coalition, like then strong decisions will not be taken. Then comes presidential democracy. President is the head of state as well as head of government, and he is elected separately from the legislature, like in USA, Brazil, etc. So here they will have a stable executive and there is clear separation of powers. But then the negative is what? Dominance by the executive. Liberal democracy. It protects individual rights, rule of law and limited government. Free press, independent judiciary, regular elections. Again, these are features you may find in India. But mostly in Western democracies, most of them have these liberal ideas. Ours is more of a mixed economy which is why we have not put it. लेकिन ये सारी चीज़ें हमारे अंदर भी है, but India is not per se a liberal democracy. तो limitation क्या है? It may not address social inequality, क्योंकि क्या है, individual rights are more supreme. तो वहाँ पे क्या होता है, social well-being will be secondary. So we follow social democracy क्या है? It emphasizes welfare, economic equality and protection of workers' rights within a democratic framework, जैसे कि Scandinavian countries में है. So that reduces inequality. लेकिन we are again not inching towards any particular theory. अब इसका नेगेटिव क्या है? हाई टैक्सेशन शायद हो सकती है, बिकॉज वेलफेयर इज वॉट वी आर गिविंग इम्पॉर्टेंस इन सोशल डेमोक्रेसी. देन कम्स पार्टिसिपेटरी डेमोक्रेसी. उसमें क्या है? एक्टिव सिटीजन इन्वॉल्वमेंट, जो कि सिर्फ और सिर्फ इलेक्शन पर ही नहीं, at every other point. So there you have participatory budgeting in Brazil. The strength is it deepens democratic culture. Limitation is it requires high civic engagement. अगर आप चाहते हो कि the citizens come and engage with you, then you should keep on engaging with them on a regular basis. Deliberative democracy. It emphasizes reasoned debate, consensus building and informed participation. जैसे कि citizens assemblies in Ireland. तो उसका they'll bring about well-reasoned decisions. Now you might be thinking, where does India fit? Actually, India is a mixed economy. And the democratic ideals that we have taken, we have Indianized everything. तो हमारे अंदर deliberative के aspects भी है, participatory aspects भी है, social aspects भी है, liberal aspects भी है. But it's not just one. जो examples मैंने दिए गए हैं, they are strictly following into one of these. So what are the points? First, direct democracy, and all of the other things are indirect only. लेकिन क्योंकि हमें एक लंबी आंसर लिखनी है, so I've elaborated upon it into representative democracy, parliamentary democracy, presidential democracy, liberal democracy, social democracy, participatory democracy, deliberative democracy. ठीक है? Now conclusion. Democracy is not a single model but a spectrum of practices. Each type has strengths suited to particular historical and social contexts. The vitality of a democracy depends on how well its institutions promote participation, accountability and justice. So let's move on to the third one, merits and demerits of democracy. So introduction. Democracy is widely regarded as the most legitimate form of government, पर उसके भी limitations है. So now we are going to evaluate a balanced. अगर आपसे ये भी पूछा गया कि what are the merits of democracy, तो आप you should add, I think since हम एक लंबी आंसर लिख रहे हैं, अंत में before the conclusion you can say 2-3 negatives of democracy. ठीक है? तो ताकि वो analytical जैसा लगे. ठीक है? So let's start with merits. It ensures political equality. कैसे? Every citizen participates in decision making through voting. Universal adult franchise is an example of it. Then protects the rights and liberties. They safeguard freedom of speech, expression and association. Example, judicial review to protect FRs. Accountability of government. Governments are answerable to people through elections. So, which is why even popular government can face defeat. Peaceful change of power. Power shifts without violence. That is done through elections. Encourages participation and civic education. Because active citizenship is encouraged in a democracy. For example, LSGs. Then promote social justice. Welfare policies that target inequality. In Europe, you'll find a lot of social security programs. Even in India also you can give. क्योंकि मैंने ज़्यादातर इससे पहले जो examples से वो India से related थे, so I've given it in other context. So what are the positives? First one, political equality, protects rights and liberties, accountability of government, peaceful change of power, encourages participation in civic education, then social justice promotion. Now what are the demerits? It's slow and inefficient decision making. Why? Because consultation and debates are an essential aspect, so that will delay the decision. So it's lengthy legislative process. Then risk of populism. Politicians will keep making unrealistic promises to gain votes. So that will lead to what? People will vote listening to that. But once they come into power, they will not do anything. So you can find examples of it anywhere. Then influence of money and media. Elections are dominated by wealthy candidates and even corporate interests, which we see in the campaign expenditures, which has been rising. Tyranny of the majority. Minorities may be ignored. ethnic majoritarianism, जो कि हम आजकल देख रहे हैं in many democracies. Voter apathy and low political education. Citizens may vote simply without even understanding issues, although you may not even go for voting. And misinformation also affects electoral outcomes. Then coalition instability. When you have a coalition government, then what happens? They'll not be able to make any decisions, and sometimes the government will also lose its power. Eventually, people will also lose their confidence. So, frequent government changes in coalition systems. So, the negatives are what? Slow and inefficient decision making, risk of populism, influence of money and media, tyranny of the majority, voter apathy and low political education, coalition instability. Now, what is the conclusion? Democracy is the most preferred system because of its commitment to rights, participation, and accountability. However, it requires active reform, transparency, civic education, and institutional strengthening to overcome its weaknesses and meet contemporary challenges. So, let's quickly move on to the fourth one. Fourth question under democracy, assessment of democracy as a form of government. So for intro, we can say it is not just evaluated by its electoral process, but also by how effectively it delivers equality, justice, accountability, and human dignity. A critical assessment will help determine whether democracy meets the expectations of a just and stable political order. See, ज़रूरी नहीं है कि ये इंट्रोडक्शन आप इस वाले सवाल को दे. You can use the previous ones also, पर इंट्रो में ये ज़रूर ध्यान रखना that you do mention what you are going to do in the body, क्योंकि एग्जामिनर अगर कुछ पढ़ भी रहा है तो पहले वो आपका इंट्रो ही पढ़ेगा. ठीक है. So the first point is political legitimacy. Democracy derives legitimacy from consent of the governed. So elections ensure peaceful leadership transitions. इसलिए elections are important. Then accountability and transparency. Democratic institutions such as parliament, judiciary, media, and civil society hold governments accountable. Example through judicial review, parliamentary questions, media pressurizing, all of that. Protection of rights. Democracy protects civil and political rights, enabling citizens to express dissent, free press, and right to protest. Promote social welfare. Democratic governments often address social and economic inequality through welfare policies, जो कि हम स्कैंडिनेविया में देख सकते हैं. Then enhances political participation. Citizens engage through elections, civil society, local governance, public consultations, LSGs. Now, what are the limitations? Quality of representation. Representation तो है, but they may not always reflect the diversity or interests of society. For example, underrepresentation of women and marginalized. Influence of money and identity politics. Campaign finance, corporate lobbying, ethnic or caste mobilization, all of these things that distort the whole process. Populism and polarization. Populist leaders exploit emotions and misinformation leads to weakened institutions. Then bureaucratic delays. The whole consultative process leads to what? A slowing down in the decision making. So for conclusion, it is the most legitimate ethical form of government because it respects human dignity, rights, and participation. Despite its weaknesses, its self-correcting mechanisms give room for what? Reform and adaptation. That is an important aspect. The other forms, no matter how great they are, there is no provision for reform or to change. Democracy is something that can be changed and it keeps on evolving. So it depends on eventually on how active the citizens are and how robust the institutions are. So let's quickly move on to theme 3, that is rights, duties, liberty, and equality. So what is the meaning, nature, and significance of rights? Rights are essential conditions or entitlements that allow individuals to live with dignity, freedom, and security. They serve as moral and legal claims that individuals can make on society and the state. Rights form the foundation of democratic governance by protecting individuals against arbitrary power and enabling meaningful participation in social and political life. So what is the meaning of rights? They are the justified claims that individuals possess by virtue of being human or by being members of a political community. For example, right to life, freedom of speech, equality before law, property rights, all of these have been given to you because you are a human being or you are part of this particular community of people who live in this land. So it ensures that citizens enjoy freedom and the protection for human development. The nature of rights. They are universal and inalienable. They apply to all human beings regardless of gender, class, race, or nationality. Universal Declaration of Human Rights sort of asserts the same thing. Then moral and legal claims. There might be ethical claims or moral foundations for it. At the same time, there are also legal backing like constitutional guarantees. The example would be right to equality is both a constitutional right as well as it's something very ethical, correlated with duties. Now, just because you have a right does not mean you can do whatever you want. You ought to perform certain duties, because for me to enjoy right to life, it requires that I need not go and kill somebody. If I am harming somebody, then my right to life can be taken away by the state. Dynamic and evolving. New rights keep on emerging with societal changes. Example, digital privacy rights or environmental rights. Then it's necessary for individual development, because rights create conditions for intellectual, moral, and social growth. Example is right to education. Then significance of rights. Protection against arbitrary power. Rights limit government authority and protect individual autonomy. Habeas corpus is a best example for it, against unlawful detention. Then ensure social and political participation. Rights like freedom of speech, assembly, right to assemble, and right to vote, all of these things enable what? Democratic participation. Then to promote equality and justice. Rights ensure equal access to resources and opportunities. Anti-discrimination rights protect marginalized groups. Then to strengthen the rule of law. Rights are enforceable through independent courts ensuring legal redress. Then to enhance human dignity. The rights safeguard basic conditions necessary for living with dignity, health, shelter, livelihood. Then the conclusion, you can say the rights are indispensable for the survival, growth, and dignity of individuals. They restrain state power, promote equality, and enable participation in democratic processes. Society that protects rights lays the foundation for justice, stability, and human flourishing. Okay. अभी क्योंकि it is taking a bit of time, I'll try to move a bit faster. मैं क्या कर लूँगी, I'll just mention the points and go. You can anyways pause and read the answers. So second question is types of duties and their implication. उसमें आप पहले you can say what duties are. They are the obligations that the individual owe to themselves, society, and state. And what is the need for duties? They'll ensure social order and collective well-being. So this balance between rights and duties are essential. And this duties is what guides our individual behavior, strengthens institutions, as well as the moral fabric of society. Now types of duties. Moral duties मतलब honesty, compassion, respect for elders, जो कि हमारे अंदर से it's very personal. Yeah, as a society we have decided on it, all those things. इसका use क्या है? They will lead to interpersonal trust and a social cohesion. The legal duties, they are enforceable by law. जैसे कि paying taxes, obeying traffic rules, all of that. And they'll maintain the rule of law and state to function. Fundamental duties, जो कि in some constitutions they are written, जैसे कि हमारे constitution में है. उससे क्या होता है? It will ensure that certain things get done. तो उसमें civic responsibility आ जाती है. You feel that this is something that I ought to do for my nation. Then social duties, जो कि community और society के तरफ है. उस पर आती है during emergencies like during COVID, how people helped each other, all of that. तो उससे collective welfare and community engagement. Then there are certain duties to self, जैसे कि self education, maintaining health, self discipline. उससे भी it is also an aspect of what? Social responsibility. Then comes the importance and implications of duties. तो उससे it will ensure social order, क्योंकि there will be no need for law to intervene. So if everybody follows laws, then there won't be much crimes. Then to complement the rights, simply giving so much of right will not lead to anything, because if I have a right to life, so do you. So now where do I draw the line? तो उसके लिए duties है that I am not supposed to harm you. If I harm you, then I am now claim to my right. Then to strengthen the democratic culture, for example voting, promote national unity, जो कि it's also mentioned in our fundamental duties to protect the national heritage. Then support justice and equality. Duties encourage citizens to challenge the discrimination and to fight for fairness. Then environmental and global responsibilities. So in conclusion, duties are needed to maintain harmony, justice, and democratic governance. And they sort of balance the rights, law, as well as the welfare. Okay? Now, the third question is positive and negative liberty. Liberty का मतलब क्या है? It is a situation in which individuals can act freely without unnecessary restrictions. And political theorists have made this distinction between positive and negative liberty. इसको पॉपुलराइज इसाया बर्लिन ने किया था, बट अ लॉट ऑफ थियरीज हैव आल्सो यूज्ड इट. नाउ इस पे हाउ डू दे डिफर इन टर्म्स ऑफ इंडिविजुअल फ्रीडम एंड रोल ऑफ स्टेट. नाउ नेगेटिव लिबर्टी. नेगेटिव लिबर्टी का मतलब है एब्सेंस ऑफ एक्सटर्नल रिस्ट्रेंट्स, यानी कि किसी भी चीज़ से मुझे फ्रीडम मतलब मिलनी नहीं है, आई एम ऑलरेडी सो फ्री. तो उस पर क्या है, द इंडिविजुअल्स आर सो फ्री दे कैन डू वॉट एवर दे वांट विदाउट इंटरफेरेंस. नॉट इंटरफेरेंस बाय स्टेट. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, no censorship. Then focus on private sphere. So then I can, choose whatever lifestyle I want, religion I want, state will not come in. Then it is also related to classical liberalism, because Locke, Mill, all of them emphasized on what limited government. So उसी से inspire होके they have come with this negative liberty. Legal and procedural freedom, जैसे कि free speech, property rights, ये सारी चीज़ें. Now इसका negative क्या है? Can lead to inequalities, क्योंकि I am saying that everybody is free to do whatever they want, but merely having freedom is not necessary. I may not be in an economic position to do that, while there might be someone who is more richer than me, then he or she will be able to enjoy it, while I will not be able to. Then it ignores the social conditions that are limiting real freedom. Again, the poor person is free to buy food, but he doesn't have the money. Positive liberty is the freedom too. That is, it is ability to act autonomously, as in you know what you are capable of and you're free to act. So it's more empowering. उसमें autonomy है, self-realization है. For example, education. Like education gives you that positive liberty. Then supportive role of the state. State can intervene how or when there is a discrimination, or to uplift or support the citizens. Example, welfare schemes and affirmative action. Then it is associated with thinkers like T.H. Green and Rousseau, because they saw that freedom is a capacity. Like, in order for me to be actually free, I should have some money, I should have clothes, I should have food, I should have a home. Basic necessities ke bina, there is no point in me having any freedom. So merely non-interference is not enough. Then collective good, जैसे कि public health laws, that is also part of what? Positive liberty. इसका जो criticism है वो ये है that it leads to excessive state control, it may lead to paternalism or coercion. यानी कि आपको लगेगा that it's for freedom, but the state is trying to coerce you. Then there's a comparison. If you want, you can draw a table and show freedom from interference, freedom to achieve potential, minimal state, activist state, individual centered, social justice centered. तो actually दोनों sides में positives and negatives दोनों ही है. So negative liberty protects the individuals from unjust restrictions, while positive liberty ensures the actual capacity to exercise freedom. So actually a balanced democracy requires what? Both of them. Now, fourth one, equality and inequality. So you know what equality is, which is fairness in distribution of rights, opportunities and resources. It's not possible to achieve absolute equality. This is the aim, and it's closely linked to liberty, justice and human rights. So what is the meaning of equality? Equality means treating individuals fairly while recognizing their inherent worth. It is not identical treatment. इसका मतलब ये नहीं है, it's not possible that nobody will treat every child as their own in the actual sense ना. लेकिन उसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि आप दूसरों के बच्चों के साथ बुरा व्यवहार करें. You be nice to them. That is it. Equal consideration. Now, what are the dimensions of equality? You have political equality. इसमें voting rights आती है. Social equality, जैसे कि these discriminatory practices उनके खिलाफ, या civil rights movement. Economic equality, like minimum wage laws, progressive taxation. Then legal equality, उसमें आती है independent judiciary. Equality of opportunity, जिससे कि reservation जैसे policies आती है. Then inequality. Inequality का मतलब क्या है? Unequal distribution. जो भी चीज़ equally मिलनी चाहिए, all of those things are unequal. Now, forms of inequality. Natural inequality, जो कि हमारे talent और ability पे based है. मतलब some people might be more talented in certain areas in that sense. Social inequality is caste, gender, race and all of that. उस पे we can work. Then economic inequality is what? Income and wealth gaps. Political inequality is unequal influence in decision making. जैसे कि if somebody is vested with more power, then that is political inequality. Causes of inequality. 1. Historical oppression. Then unequal access to education. Economic systems favoring the elites. Cultural biases. Global economic disparities. Then what is the significance of equality? It ensures social justice, promotes national unity, enhances democratic participation, reduces conflict, and strengthens human dignity. So, equality is central to achieving justice and social stability. While inequalities are inevitable, democratic societies must ensure they are not oppressive or unjust. Okay, so a balance is what we need for a fairer society where the individual can realize their potential. Now, on to theme 4, that is justice. And the most often asked question is John Rawls theory of justice. तो ये वाली क्वेश्चन मैं थोड़ी सी डिटेल में बोलूँगी. एनीवेज जो बाकी के क्वेश्चंस है उसके आंसर यू कैन पॉज एंड राइट देम डाउन, या आप अपने लैंग्वेज में you can write and see all of that. John Rawls in his classical work A Theory of Justice developed one of the most influential modern frameworks of justice. His goal was to provide a moral foundation for democratic societies. तो उसका जो मॉडल था उसमें justice was rooted in fairness, equality and rational decision making. And his theory, John Rawls' theory, is what? It is justice as fairness. So the original position. Rawls का क्वेश्चन ये था, how would rational individuals design principles of justice if they were free, equal and unbiased? He imagines individuals in a hypothetical situation where they can choose rules for society from a neutral standpoint. Now, the veil of ignorance. So, in this case, they are unbiased, they are equal and they are free. So, they are ignorant about what? Class or economic position, gender, caste, race, abilities or talents, religion or ideology, social status and all of that. So, इस process का purpose क्या था? To eliminate the bias and ensure fairness. मतलब अगर ये एक standpoint, neutral standpoint नहीं होगा, then a rich person would want to protect wealth. But behind the veil, as in, imagine you're standing behind a curtain or something and then you're asked to evaluate somebody. Then in that case, as in you're asked to judge that person, then you will judge purely based on the information. You will not see the person. Then, what are the two principles of justice? First is equal basic liberties. That is, each person should have an equal right to the most extensive set of basic liberties, which is compatible with others having the same liberties. यानी कि the basic liberty should be same for everyone. That is what it means. जैसे कि freedom of speech, conscience, political participation, right to property, freedom from arbitrary arrest. ये सारी चीज़ें सभी के लिए it's the same. They protect the fundamental political and civil rights. Then second principle is social and economic inequalities. Now, inequality exists according to Rawls only if it satisfies two conditions. Panab equally you. First one is fair equality of opportunity. Everybody should have the same opportunity to attain something. For example, access to education is same for all. Now the difference principle. Inequalities are justified only if they benefit the least advantaged members of society. That is, in the absolute sense of the term justice, his justice is rooted in what? Fairness. So, वैसे तो everybody is equal. Now, when can we accept inequalities? Is it part of justice to bring in inequalities? जैसे कि welfare schemes है, you have to give special provisions. Isn't it not then? Again, justice is the point because you're favoring someone. So you're saying you can favor if there is no fair equality of opportunity. If this access to basic needs or something very essential is not, for everybody, then you can consider inequality. Similarly, the second one is a difference principle. Only if the least disadvantaged people are not getting the benefit, then you can create some sort of inequality. For example, high salaries for doctors. Now that is unequal only, but it's okay. Why? Because it's an incentive so that they would go and work even with the poor. Now what are the priority rules? So he gives first principle, liberties should be more important. Then comes second principle, that is, you should always ensure that everybody is treated equally. If you cannot treat everybody equally in terms of opportunity or in terms of getting into the least advantaged, then you can move into inequalities. Then fair opportunity should be the bottom line. Then comes difference principle. So no economic gain should violate these basic liberties. Then importance of Rawls theory. He emphasizes fairness, not on utility. He balances liberty with equality. He justifies the idea of a welfare state. and influences constitutional interpretation, public policy, global justice debates, etc. So, what is the conclusion? This has revolutionized the modern political thought by rooting justice in fairness, equality, and rational choice. So, it still remains central to debates on welfare rights, equality of opportunity, and democratic governance. So, it's a moral compass to design just institutions that protect liberties while addressing inequality. So, जो पहले हमने देखा that was Rawls' theory. Now we are going to see Marx's views on justice. ठीक है? So, intro में हम क्या बोल सकते हैं that Marx's theory offers a radically different understanding of justice. It's not liberal for Marx के theory से या उनके views से influence थे in terms of material conditions, modes of production and class relations. So for Marxist, justice is a part of what? Economic equality. It's a struggle against exploitation and to transform economic structures. So justice as product of material conditions. Marx ने argue किया that justice reflect the economic system of a society. For example, एक feudal society हो, capitalist society हो, socialist society हो, each of them define justice differently. So justice is a part of what? Class structure. हर एक सोसाइटी का जो भी क्लास स्ट्रक्चर है उसके डिपेंडेंट होती है जस्टिस. Now critique of capitalist justice, and obviously Marxists were against capitalism, so he said that it is unjust because workers produce surplus value but receive only a small portion as wages. Capitalists appropriate the surplus, creating exploitation. Laws under capitalism protect private property, not workers. Then example would be capitalist wage contracts appear fair, but workers are structurally disadvantaged. Hence, capitalist justice is unfair. Then concept of exploitation. Again, working class exploitation is a central idea. How are they exploited? Through unequal ownership of means of production. So real justice requires abolition of exploitative relations. Justice in a socialist society. Abolition of private ownership of means of production. तो उससे exploitation नहीं होगा. Distribution based on contribution. And initially Marx said, from each according to his ability to each according to his labors. That is, workers should receive rewards proportional to their contribution. Higher phase of communism. Ultimate justice emerges in a classless, stateless society. From each according to his ability to each according to his needs. Distribution is based on human need, not labor contribution. Now, equality and collective welfare. Marx stresses economic equality and collective ownership to eliminate class divisions. This ensures genuine freedom for all, unlike liberal freedom that protects private property. So, in Marx's view, economic equality and collective ownership is the basis of justice, not private property rights. Critique of liberal justice, obviously, क्योंकि उनका focus था individual rights और formal equality में. So Marxists were against it because it ignores structural inequalities, class power is maintained, then emphasizes legal equality over material equality. So for conclusion, he wants a transformation of the economic structures rather than simply reforms, and he's saying each of these class structures should be revolutionized. So for him, justice is achieved through eliminating exploitation, establishing collective ownership, and creating a classless society where human needs guide distribution. And it's also a critique of capitalist inequality and an inspiration for socialist movements. Then a comparison of Marxist and non-Marxist views of power. So for intro, we can start with the concept of power. Again, it's an essential concept in political theory, and Marxists emphasize on economic structures and class domination. Non-Marxists focus more on institutional, behavioral and relational aspects of power. So first let's focus on Marxist view of power. Power is rooted in economic structure. जैसे कि हमने पहले देखा. For example, capitalists dominate because they control what? Factories, land, finance, etc. So whoever has ownership of the means of production, they will hold the power. Class domination. It is always exercised by the bourgeois or the ruling class or the proletariat or the working class. State institutions serve ruling class interests. Then state is an instrument of class rule because state enforces the law that sort of suppresses the dissent, anti-union laws, corporate influence in policy making, etc. Then ideological power. It could be through schools, media, religion, all of that. And Gramsci termed this ideological power as hegemony. Then revolution is redistribution of power. So he said that in order to achieve true justice, You must overthrow capitalist structures and establish collective ownership. Then, non-Marxist views of power. Pluralist perspective. Power is distributed among competing groups. So then you will have varied opinions. So interest groups influence policy. Then Weberian view. Marx Weber's view comes in under non-Marxist views. What did Weber say? He said power is the ability to impose one's will even though there is a resistance. And he said there are three sources for it. One is traditional authority, second is charismatic authority, third is legal rational authority. I think it's clear. Traditional मतलब जैसे कि family में the elders, that's traditional. Charismatic based on your personality. कुछ लोगों के सामने they can have more influence. Legal rational authority is अगर आपको लगे okay सामने वाला जो बोल रहा है it's the right thing, so then I'll follow that. Then elite theory. Power is concentrated in the small elites, political, economic or military. Like how Wright Mills said, the power elite. Like the military industrial complex in US. Foucault's postmodern view, wherein it is dispersed through networks and institutions like in prisons, hospitals or schools where power is everywhere and it sort of shapes even without you knowing it. The behavioral approach that studies how individuals and groups influence decisions, which you can see in voting behavior, leadership styles, etc. So now a comparison. Marx's view gave importance to economic domination while others gave importance to any kinds of power. Class conflict, here it is balanced competition or pluralism. State serves the ruling class. In non-Marxist view, state is a neutral arbiter. Then, Marxist views are more structural, non-Marxist views are more about behavioral or relational. So, Marxist theory is more on the structural and economic domination, while non-Marxist theory, they reveal the institutional, behavioral and ideological dimensions. Now, Gandhi's concept of justice. It is unique because it's rooted in what ethical principles of non-violence, spiritual humanism and all of that. So, he emphasizes what? A moral transformation and welfare of all. And this is again combined with what? Satya and Ahimsa as well as the dignity of every individual. So, justice should be based on truth and non-violence. If you're fighting for justice, then your means should be non-violent because violence corrupts both the end and means. And he used satyagraha for the same thing because he was fighting injustice, so he ought to fight it in the most just way. Dignity of the individual. So every person has that dignity irrespective of caste, class, gender, religion or creed or whatever. So justice means respecting that. Example, his Harijan movement. Social harmony and Sarvodaya. So he is against any kind of conflict. It's all upliftment of all. His view of Sarvodaya can be seen in trusteeship, wherein wealthy individuals were asked or required to use resources for public good. Decentralization and self-rule like Gram Swaraj, local self-governments, participatory decision making and self-reliance. Okay, so this is about Gandhi. Then comes economic justice and trusteeship. It was against class struggle. So he also opposed what? Conflict and revolution. Unlike Marx. Then trusteeship concept, wherein wealthy individuals should act like trustees and they should be willing to give away their excess wealth for economic justice. Then spiritual basis. Justice is not just economic or legal but moral and spiritual. So social transformation through self-discipline, moral courage. Then equality without uniformity. That is, he respected the diversity, wherein he said all religions must be treated equally. So this idea of justice blends the moral values, social harmony, economic fairness as well as individual dignity. At the same time, it's against what? It's against violence and emphasizes the ethical transformation, compassion and community-based living. So it's a humane alternative to both capitalist and Marxist frameworks. Let's quickly move on to theme 5, that is liberalism and related ideologies. So what is liberalism? What is its meaning, characteristics and significance? It emerged in 17th and 18th centuries, one of the most influential political ideologies, gave importance to what? Individual freedom, limited government, rule of law and protection of rights. So it arose as a reaction against feudalism, absolute monarchy and religious authoritarianism. Its ideas shaped modern democratic institutions and constitutional states. Now what is the meaning of liberalism? Liberalism is a political philosophy that gives importance to individual liberty, equality before law, limited government and free choice. So it assumes that individuals are rational, so they can make moral and economic decisions. Core characteristics. It is a moral center of politics, like freedom of conscience, speech, and personal life. Liberty is the highest value. Freedom from censorship or freedom for self development, both negative and positive liberty are essential. Then, equality for law. Formal legal equality ensures fairness, rule of law, impartial courts, etc. Limited government. State power must be restricted to protect individual rights. Constitutionalism, separation of powers. Consent and popular sovereignty. Governments gain legitimacy through the consent of the governed, elections and representative institutions. Then market economy. Classical liberals support free markets and private property. Adam Smith's idea of the invisible hand. Tolerance and pluralism. You must accept diverse beliefs, cultures, lifestyles, etc. Multicultural policies, for example. Then secularism. Religion and state must remain separate, like how we see in liberal democracies. Then significance of liberalism. It is the foundation of modern democracy. Ideas like rule of law, rights, constitutional government flowing directly from liberal thought, etc. Protection of civil liberties. Liberalism shaped human rights frameworks such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Then economic progress. Market freedom contributed to industrialization and global trade. Social reform. Liberal values contributed to abolition of slavery, women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights. Peace and stability. Liberal democracies promote peaceful negotiation and institutional conflict resolution. So, liberalism is a cornerstone of modern political life. While people feel that it leads to inequality and excessive individualism, it's committed toward freedom, dignity, and rule of law. Then, welfare state. Welfare state is a model of governments in which state actively promotes social and economic well-being through public services, social security, and redistributive policies. The idea of welfare state came up in 20th century after Great Depression and World War II to balance out capitalism with social justice. So what is the meaning? It ensures minimum living standards, reduces inequality, and protects vulnerable groups through social welfare policies. So the idea is socially responsible state who treats its citizens like its children. Then core features, social security against unemployment, illness, disability, old age, like you may find schemes in Sweden, UK, Germany, etc. Provision of essential services, education, healthcare, housing, public utilities, like in National Health Service. Redistribution of wealth, progressive taxation reduces wealth disparities. State responsibility for welfare. Government must ensure basic well-being of all citizens. Rural employment guarantees in India. Mixed economy, wherein private enterprise is combined with government regulation. Social justice and equality, to reduce the structural inequalities like welfare schemes or affirmative actions. Now, what are the strengths? It reduces inequality, protects a vulnerable group, strengthens human development, stabilizes economy. Now, what are the criticisms? High taxations, because these welfare policies require money. Dependency culture, because the individual may not develop his or her potential, rather will depend on the state. Bureaucratic inefficiency. Fiscal burden. Obviously, subsidies can strain especially unsustainable ones, can strain the government budgets. So, welfare state is a humane and balanced approach to governance, wherein economic freedom and social protection are combined. Though fiscal strain, bureaucratic complexity remains, it is very much essential to promote equality, equity, dignity, and inclusive development. Then, libertarianism. Libertarianism prioritizes individual liberty above everything else. So, it calls for minimal state intervention, free markets, and strong protection of private property. Libertarianism came from classical liberalism, but it sort of pushes. In classical liberalism, Locke or Mill, they argue for limited government or governance, but here it is stretching it further. So it holds that only legitimate role of the state is to protect individuals from force, fraud, and theft. So as long as no crime is happening, like welfare, distribution, regulation, all of these things are not needed. You just need to protect life and anything that is deranging it, maybe law and order, but nothing else. Core principles, maximum individual liberty. So, to make personal and economic choices, so long as nobody is harmed. Freedom to trade, speak, associate, etc. Minimal state, like night watchman state. only policing, national defense, protection of contracts, strong property rights, and redistribution is seen as a form of oppression. Free market economy. State should not intervene because competition will lead toward efficiency. Voluntary social action. Welfare should come from charity, not government. Notable thinkers of this idea are libertarianism is Robert Nozick. So he defended the minimal state and self-ownership. Then Ayn Rand. He advocated ethical egoism and laissez-faire capitalism. Strengths of libertarianism is it protects the individual freedom, encourages innovation and growth, reduces bureaucracy. But what are the criticism? It ignores social inequality because you are saying that absolute property rights means even if I have land in excess, I will not give it to somebody who needs it. Weakens the welfare and safety nets. Then market failures, unrealistic assumption of rational individuals. So for conclusion, we can say libertarianism is a strong defense of personal freedom and manual government. However, its neglect of social justice, welfare and structural inequality sort of limits the practicality in modern democratic societies. So balanced approach would be what? To combine freedom with social protection. Okay. Now the fourth one is neoliberalism. Again, it's again a form of economic liberalism that again gained prominence in late 20s. So it emphasizes what? Deregulation, privatization, free trade, globalization, and again reduction of state intervention. It is associated with leaders like Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, and it reshaped global political economy. Now, meaning of neoliberalism. It promotes market-based economic policies, arguing that free markets will lead to more efficiency, innovation, and economic growth. So, state should only play a limited role, and that private enterprise should drive the development. Core features: deregulation, removal of government controls, financial deregulation in US, UK, etc. In industries, prices, and even in labor, privatization, like in telecom, airlines, banks, etc. Free trade and globalization. So that would lead to reduction of tariffs and international investment would be promoted. Reduction of state spending. Encouragement for foreign investment because countries should open up their markets. Market as a regulator. So the state need not regulate, market will regulate. Now strengths of neoliberalism, obviously economic growth will happen. Efficiency and innovation will happen. Global integration will happen. What are the criticism? That will lead to inequality because income gaps will happen. Weakens welfare and public goods because social spending, when it's reduced, social security will not happen. It will benefit a few. Corporate domination, MNCs would be governing it. Precarious labor conditions because flexible labor markets means that job is not secured, anybody can be thrown out at any point. Environmental damage. So for conclusion, we can say it transformed global economics by promoting free markets and limiting state intervention, while it contributed to growth and global integration. It also deepened the inequality and weakened the social protection. So a balanced model is what we need in the long term. Now moving on to theme 6, that is nationalism. So nationalism again is another political ideology which is to reinforce loyalty and devotion to nation. So it was a defining force in modern politics. Even the idea of state is based on what? Nationalism. So that inspired what? Liberation movements, unity, and even global politics. So social, economic, and political changes, especially from 18th century, all of these revolutions that we have seen even now or even in the past happened because of nationalism. Meaning of nationalism. It is a belief that a group of people sharing common identity, could be culture, language, history, ethnicity, or territory, they should form an independent political community or nation state. So it has two core ideas, that you should believe in a national identity, and second is the desire for political self-rule or sovereignty. Now, rise and the historical evolution of nationalism. First is the intellectual foundation in 18th century. Enlightenment thinkers like Rousseau emphasized sovereignty and a general will. So that challenged what? Monarchy and divine rule. Then French Revolution, that led to the birth of modern nationalism. So citizens saw themselves as members of a nation, not under a king, and liberty, equality, fraternity sort of united them. Then Industrial Revolution, that created economic independence and class mobility. So that led, like through modern education, communication networks, and national markets, they became a collective whole. They became a community. Anti-colonial movements. Again, for liberation movements, the feeling of nationalism is what drove them. For example, Gandhi or Nehru led the Indian freedom struggle because we were all Indians. That is what brought us all together. 19th century unification movements. Again, the unification of Italy by Garibaldi or Germany, Bismarck, all of these things happened because they wanted to combine all of their people together. Now, spread through cultural revival like Bengali Renaissance or revival movements. Literature was also part of it. Then, post World War II nationalism. After 1945, decolonization led to the birth of many new nations, and UN also supported this, aspiration for new nations. Now, growth of nationalism in contemporary world. Identity and ethnic nationalism. Groups assert cultural rights and autonomy, like in Catalonia, Scotland. Then, civic nationalism. It is with respect to shared citizenship, constitutional values, and participation, like how we have in our country. We are all like, our nationalism is connected to our constitution. Whatever is said, that is what we ought to feel. Then, globalization and reactionary nationalism. For example, economic insecurity will again lead to nationalist feelings like Brexit or America First. Then, for conclusion, we can say that nationalism evolved from Enlightenment ideas, and it further shaped the states' liberation movements, identities, and it forges the unity and self-determination. But at the same time, it's a challenge to exclusion, conflict, and ethnocentrism. Then, what are the meaning and characteristics of nationalism? It is a political doctrine as well as a psychological sentiment. So it has led to self-rule, unity, and identity. But at the same time, it can also lead to conflict and exclusion. So, meaning of nationalism, wherein we belong to a common cultural historical community, we are part of a nation, and that this nation should have political autonomy or sovereignty. So, it's an emotional attachment to the nation, and then it sort of legitimizes a political authority. What are the key characteristics? For example, we would mostly be united by culture, language, religion, ethnicity, history, and territory. For example, France, it's a language and republican values. Now, it's not necessary that these are the things. Like for in India, we are now united by culture, language, religion, ethnicity, or history, or even, territory for that matter. But it could even be that feeling, this diversity is what unites us. Aspiration for self-rule, like how we saw in India. A nationalist community that wants political independence. Emotional and psychological bond, like national flags, anthems, or symbols, they create a sense of pride and emotion in us. Then sense of superiority sometimes, like the fascist nationalism in Italy and Germany, they feel that they're superior to the rest. Then integration and unity. It can unify the diverse populations under common identity, like the unification of Germany under Bismarck. Modern political ideology. It is shaped by mass education, print capitalism, democratic participation, industrialization, then mass mobilization. So it sort of evokes what political action that would be taken up collectively, like the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa. Ambivalent character. It can be liberating, like in anti-colonialism, or oppressive, like in xenophobia. Even xenophobia is also rooted in what? Ours own, you're not ours. So that feeling of ours is also from nationalism or ethnic cleansing. Now, what are the types of nationalism? There is civic nationalism, then ethnic nationalism based on race, culture, and ancestry, then cultural nationalism based on some sort of cultural heritage. So, nationalism is a multifaceted ideology, and it's rooted in identity, self-rule, and collective emotion. It has unified nations and inspired liberation, but at the same time has also led to conflict and exclusion. Now, the next one is Ernest Gellner's theory of nationalism. So he was a prominent sociologist and political theorist. So he viewed nationalism as a product of industrial society, not of something from traditional. So his theory is structural, modernist, and rooted in socio-economic transformation. So nationalism as a modern phenomenon. He argued that nationalism is not ancient. It arises specifically in industrial societies where economic and social conditions require cultural homogeneity. Now, the link between industrialization and nationalism. Industrial society needs a standardized form like electric workforce, Standardized communication, shared education, mobility of labor. Nationalism provides a unified culture to support all of these needs. Now, high culture versus low culture. In agrarian societies, low cultures dominate and elites maintain a separate high culture. Industrialization sort of abolished this divide, created a common high culture for all. Now, role of education. Mass education is essential for industrial societies, creating shared language and values. French nationalism built through standardized education. Nationalism as a response to social mobility. Industrialization increases social mobility. People must adapt to new environments and roles. Nations do not create nationalism. Nationalism creates nations. Gellner famously argued that it is not nationalism that has created a nation, but rather it is nations that has invented it. It's the reverse. Rather, nationalism constructs a cultural unity for our socio-economic needs. In the political dimension, it demands that political and national units must coincide. For example, people with common cultures seek their own state. Critiques of Gellner overemphasizes economic factors, neglects emotional, ethnic, and historical aspects, doesn't fully explain ancient cultural identities. Then other theories highlight the role of imagination and ethnicity, like Anderson or Smith. So, for conclusion, we can say that it explains nationalism as a structural response to industrialization. So, he linked nationalism to social mobility, education, and economic needs. So, he showed that nations are modern creations shaped by material conditions. So, but that's still central to modern explanations. Now, what are the theories or forms of nationalism? Already explained, but I have given it in detail here. It has taken multiple forms across regions and historical periods. So, due to the diverse cultural, political, and economic circumstances. First, civic nationalism. It is based on citizenship, shared values, and loyalty to institutions. It is inclusive and non ethnic. It emphasizes rights, democracy, and constitutionalism, like American and French nationalism. Now, ethnic nationalism. It is rooted in common ancestry, blood, race, or ethnicity. It is exclusive and identity based. It's often linked to cultural purity narratives. Then, cultural nationalism. It emphasizes shared cultural heritage, like in Indian cultural nationalism or like we see in Bengal Renaissance. Religious nationalism. It is through a common religion, like in Israel or Pakistan. Anti colonial nationalism. It emerged in colonized regions who are fighting for liberation. It combines national identity with political struggle, like in Kenya. Economic nationalism. It advocates for self sufficiency and protection of domestic industries. It is a reaction to globalization. For example, America First or India Swadeshi movement. Then expansionist nationalism. It is aggressive. It seeks to expand territory and dominance, like in Nazi Germany. Then post-colonial nationalism. It is focused on nation building and development, like the African states. So nationalism is not a single ideology, but a spectrum of political, cultural, ethnic, and economic beliefs. So while some of them may promote unity and liberation, others will lead to exclusion and conflict. So understanding all of these aspects is required to navigate the nationalism's complex role. So with this, let me just wind up आज का ये जो वीडियो. I'll be uploading the other themes shortly क्योंकि एग्ज़ाम मंडे को है. बट ट्रस्ट मी, अगर आप ये पढ़ के जाओगे with these answers, I assure you that you'll score wonderful marks. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share and comment. Bye bye.